The Witcher Season 3. I'm back, stuck once again on episode 2 of Season 3. For part 1 of this, I started to empathise with Hercules, cleaning out the Augean stables. In part 1, covering the first 80 seconds of this episode, took me about 5 minutes, but I can at least console myself that it can't get any worse than this, surely. But I left off part 1 with Geralt going to see the detectives Codringer and Fen, who he wants to help him find Reince, who he let go for no reason last episode. I thought I may have missed something, so I went back and watched Season 2 again. And how can I put this? Simon Callow is in 2 episodes of this show, one in Season 2 and one in Season 3, playing the same character. And the 2 times he plays Codringer, he's using completely different accents and arguably different characters.
You're lucky the trap's broken. Usually it shoots 20-inch metal spikes out the studs. Got a hawker a few nights ago. If you know that, you're already in too deep. This mage, whoever it is very dangerous.
I don't know why this is, but I can only think of 2 possible scenarios. Either they brought Simon Callow back and he didn't even bother to watch his previous performance and clearly couldn't remember it and nobody else cared enough to check, or he did remember it and the director asked him to do something different and didn't care if it would clash with what he did in Season 2. This is how little anyone working on this show seems to care. Ciri is also a nightmare now. Watching this show feels like I'm babysitting an angry teenage girl, and frankly, kind of none of this next scene works either. Yen and Ciri are still being hunted by every kingdom on the continent. I don't know if monsters are still hunting Ciri. There's also a rogue assassin mage and their powerful master, and a monstrously powerful spectral army called the Wild Hunt. And Yen and Ciri are still not acting like they're being hunted at all. The most logical approach for them would be to get somewhere safe as fast as possible, stay away from people, wear disguises, stay off main roads. Instead, here they are casually walking around a city, shopping and chatting and not even in disguise. They're there to get a portal to Aretuza. That's the magic school for girls that Yen went to. A sorceress friend of Yen's is in the town who makes portals, and they also want to buy a comb for Ciri's hair. They go there and are talking to the sorceress lady who makes the portals, and I watched this scene maybe 5 times writing this review, and it wasn't until far later that I realised this character was even supposed to be Keira Metz. I remember the character well from the 3rd Witcher game, and not only does she look nothing like the character I remember, she doesn't act anything like the character either. I loved that character from the games, and I didn't even recognise her in this series. That happens a lot watching this show. Once again, Netflix, cosplayers do a better job of looking like the characters than your show does. But what do I expect when they're spending a paltry $20 million per episode just to get BTFO'd by a girl that probably made that costume in her bedroom? This show has possibly the worst casting of anything I've ever seen, apart from maybe Witcher Blood Origin, and unsurprisingly, the same casting company were responsible for both. But I'll get into that. Boy, will I get into that on the review for the next episode. They talk with Keira until a man comes in with a person on a leash, wanting to take a portal as well. He's going to Nilfgaard. Ciri sees the man's future and how the person on a leash will suffer if she does nothing to help, so she sets them free, starts a fight, and Yen then breaks the large man's neck. This scares faux Keira Metz, who says, "What have you done? That was one of Hoovernagel's men," and is that supposed to mean something to me? Because in the context of this show, it means nothing. They throw the name in like that's some established character, but to my recollection, that's the first mention of the character in the show. And Yen's friend runs off, leaving them without a portal and a way to Aretuza, with just the slight problem that Yennefer can make portals. She made portals constantly in Season 1. She could have made a portal and taken them to Aretuza at any point. There is no reason for her and Ciri to be here at all. And this is maybe to set something up from the books, where Hoovernagel comes back for revenge on Ciri later, and far from laying low and not attracting attention, Ciri causes trouble literally everywhere she goes. Meanwhile, at Aretuza, some of the young sorceresses are disappearing and the sorcerers are arguing about politics, and none of this lands for me. The show seems to be trying to do some kind of Game of Thrones thing, but they haven't laid any of the foundation. So when they talk about the character Henselt...
Even if Henselt wanted to send the grain to Temeria, the damn Scoia'tael would just steal it on the way.
Ah, Henselt, of course. Has that character even had a single line in this show? What is it supposed to mean to the audience that Henselt is refusing to send grain to Temeria and the Scoia'tael will steal it anyway if he tries? The show hasn't established much of anything about who Henselt even is, where Temeria is, why it's important, who the Scoia'tael are, where they are. If they wanted to do this, they needed to have some of these kings as POV characters and spend some time in their courts. The show is failing to establish the setting. The war that started when Nilfgaard invaded the north ended at the Battle of Soden, most of which happened off camera and gave birth to an uneasy peace. The north is supposed to be a powder keg. The former allies that fought against Nilfgaard are quarrelling, wondering when Nilfgaard will set its eyes on them again. And all of the setup this got was a few lines in Season 2 that aired way back in 2021. All of the kingdoms are spying on each other. The messenger from the start of this episode has a greater context in the books. Messengers between the kings had previously been being handled by the court mages. Messengers had started to be used again because the kings had stopped trusting the mages. They haven't got any of this across in the show. It's such a shame. This show has good actors in it, good sets. It wasn't cheap, but the CGI looks worse in Season 3 than 2 and the writing is not good. But they could have made something like Game of Thrones out of this material. They just needed to differentiate the factions, spend more time with the leaders of the different kingdoms, and maybe use maps, because it's hard to overstate quite how much heavy lifting that Game of Thrones map intro did in giving the audience a feeling of the world and where things are in it. Because watching this show, you would never know where anything is. Characters just teleport around the world. A character will be somewhere, the camera will cut away, and the next time we see them, an unknown amount of time will have passed and they'll be on the other side of the continent. The weird timeline has been a constant issue for this show since Season 1, so where was I? Well, Geralt of Rivia, the eponymous Witcher and hero of the series, has gone to see two detectives, Codringer and Fen. A sorcerer named Reince is trying to take Geralt's adopted daughter Ciri, and Geralt is trying to track Reince down after he let him live last episode for no good reason whatsoever. So here Geralt could have just hit Reince with his sword as he went past him. Or how about this for an idea? He had the time to grab Reince by the collar and take him back through the portal alive, because they suspect Reince is working for someone far more powerful, and with Reince captured and alive, you can interrogate him as to who the unknown enemy is. This is a problem with the direction in episode 1. If they needed Reince to get away for narrative reasons, then they needed to do it in a way that made it look like Geralt had no other choice but to let him go. Maybe have the portal that Geralt needs to go back through start to become unstable and have Reince all the way across the room. So Geralt had to go through the portal that second or not at all, because the way they did it makes Geralt the Witcher look like a moron. Netflix, you just chose to make the hero of your series look like a moron. At this point, pretty much every character in your show does. After some haggling, Geralt pays them and Codringer tells him,
Sorcerer's rejects too often train as killers. And this Rience, we know, was kicked out of Banard.
That supports our theory.
Well,
and they keep on doing this. This is Witcher Blood Origin writing again. I don't recall Banard as a concept ever being mentioned or explained in this series before. You can maybe try and intuit or guess what it may be. Maybe a school, and you'd be wrong. It's in fact a city in the kingdom of Kaedwen that contains a school for male sorcerers. It's like the male equivalent of Aretuza, the school for sorceresses that Yen went to. Kaedwen also contains the Witcher's Retreat, Kaer Morhen, from last season's finale. It's the home of the School of the Wolf, Geralt's group of witches. There are other schools in the lore, but in this series I have no idea if they even exist. And they probably won't, because it will not be a shock if this show gets cancelled now Henry Cavill's leaving. And it's like the writers actively dislike the lore of the series they're writing for. And much like Witcher Blood Origin, it's like the series needs a glossary. What would someone get out of this if this series was all they knew about The Witcher? How about instead have this line? This Reince, we know, was kicked out of the Magic Academy in Banard. The writers could have even added what he was kicked out for. I understand in the lore it was for petty theft, but you can use that to paint a bigger picture of the man's character. You can build him up as a bad guy or as a threat. You could have had the detective say, Reince was kicked out of the Magic Academy at Banard. Then from our best information, we suspect he was trained by the Kedwenian spy masters as an assassin. Give the audience something. Heaven help anyone that stumbled upon this episode in isolation. They will understand almost nothing of what's going on. The Witcher Season 3 is unbelievable. I thought I'd be able to hammer out a quick 10-minute review of this episode, but I keep on finding more things wrong with it. It's like a bottomless pit. So all Geralt gets out of this conversation for a bag of coins is a location where Reince may or may not be. So Geralt is going there, while Yen and Ciri are going to Aretuza, which is here, where Yen hopes Ciri will be safe and she can maybe learn some magic. So Yen is taking Ciri to the Academy of Sorcery at Aretuza and to Tissaia de Brise.
Tissaia promised them Cirilla of Cintra's head on a platter, and she failed to deliver. We want peace. Let's find the brat and kill her.
No.
A character who has promised to behead Ciri. So all in all, a great place to keep her safe.
A dwarf